The stars in the Zarian Nebula had not seen peace for over 100 years. Today they would witness something far worse than the usual battles that scarred this region of space. Three massive fleets hung in the darkness like angry storm clouds, ready to unleash destruction on a scale the galaxy had never seen before. Commander Zeth-Kalar stood on the bridge of his crystal fortress ship and looked out at his enemy fleets with cold satisfaction. His ship was made entirely of living crystal that could sing with deadly harmony. When the crystals vibrated together, they could shatter planets like glass marbles. Behind him stretched a fleet of 200,000 vessels, all built from the same singing crystal. Each ship pulsed with a soft blue light that meant death to anyone who heard their song. The Vorthek Empire had ruled 40 star systems for 3 centuries. They were tall beings made of living rock and crystal who could reshape matter with their minds. Zeth-Kalar had killed his own father to become commander and had spent 50 years preparing for this day. His crystal ships could break apart and reform in new patterns during battle. They could sing harmonies that would tear apart any ship not made of their special crystal. Today he would use these powers to destroy his 2 greatest enemies and become ruler of half the galaxy. In the second Fleet, War Chief Morgthul clicked his mandibles together in anticipation. His body was like a giant insect with 6 arms and compound eyes that could see in all directions at once. His bioships were alive and could grow new parts during battle. Some ships looked like enormous beetles while others resembled flying jellyfish or giant spiders. All of them were bred for war and fed on the metal of destroyed enemy vessels. The hive swarms had conquered 60 star systems by eating everything in their path. Their ships could reproduce during combat by splitting apart like cells dividing. When a bioship was damaged, it would spawn dozens of smaller fighter craft from its wounds. Morgthul commanded over 300,000 living vessels that could think and fight on their own. His species had been at war with the crystal beings for 200 years. Today that war would finally end with total victory. The Third Fleet belonged to Supreme Admiral Kixandra, who was not made of solid matter at all, but pure energy contained in a humanoid shape. Her ships were built from focused light and could phase in and out of normal space at will. They could turn stars into weapons by redirecting their energy through massive lens arrays. The Photonic Collective controlled energy itself and could create matter from nothing but concentrated starlight. Kixandra had brought 150,000 energy vessels that glowed like miniature suns. Her people had been fighting both the Crystal Empire and the insect swarms for 150 years. They believed that only beings of pure energy deserved to exist in the universe. All solid matter was an imperfection that needed to be burned away. Today she would use the power of nearby stars to accomplish this goal. Each warlord believed they would emerge victorious from the coming battle. Each had spent decades preparing their ultimate weapons and gathering their strongest forces. None of them noticed the tiny human ship that watched from the edge of the nebula. Captain John Carter stood on the bridge of the UES Pioneer and felt sick to his stomach as he watched the alien fleets prepare for war. His ship was barely 200 meters long and carried only 30 crew members. Compared to the massive alien vessels, it was like a minnow swimming among whales. The humans had been exploring this region of space for 3 months and had stumbled upon the largest gathering of warships in galactic history. Lisa Park, his science officer, was recording everything on her instruments. The energy readings were beyond anything in human databases. Ben Adams, the tactical specialist, had given up trying to count enemy vessels after reaching 500,000. Communications officer Amy Stone was monitoring the alien transmissions and translating what she could understand. The 3 alien fleets had arranged themselves in a triangle formation with each point exactly 1 million kilometers from the others. In the center of the triangle was a small asteroid where the 3 warlords would meet for final negotiations before the battle began. These talks were really just a formality since none of the 3 leaders had any intention of backing down. Carter watched through his viewscreen as 3 small ships detached from the main fleets and flew toward the asteroid. Each ship represented power beyond human imagination. The crystal ship sang a low harmonic note that made nearby space shimmer. The bioship pulsed with organic light and grew weapon pods as it flew. The energy ship flickered in and out of visibility. Like a mirage, the three warlords met on the surface of the asteroid in a transparent dome filled with breathable atmosphere. Carter could see them through his long-range sensors as they faced each other across a small table. Zethkalar towered over the others with his crystal body reflecting the light from nearby stars. Morgthul kept his 6 arms in constant motion, as he spoke while his compound eyes never stopped scanning for threats. Kixandra appeared as a bright outline of contained energy that hurt to look at directly. The negotiations lasted exactly 12 minutes. Carter could not understand their languages, but he could see their body language growing more aggressive with each passing moment. Ancient hatreds and the promise of ultimate power made compromise impossible. Each warlord believed that total victory was within their grasp. Finally, Zethkalar stood up from the table, and his crystal body began to glow brighter. Morgthul spread all 6 arms wide and clicked his mandibles in what Carter recognized as a threat display. Kixandra's energy form expanded until it filled half the dome with brilliant light. The 3 warlords returned to their ships without another word. The dome on the asteroid collapsed and was abandoned as the 3 vessels flew back to their respective fleets. Within minutes, every ship in all 3 armadas was powering up their weapons and moving into battle formation. Carter turned to his crew and saw the same expression of horror on every face. They were about to witness the destruction of entire civilizations. 3 of the most powerful forces in the galaxy were about to tear each other apart, and there was nothing a single small human ship could do to stop it. The signal lights on the alien flagships began to flash. The battle was about to begin. The first shot came from Zethkalar's flagship as its crystal hull began to sing a note so deep it made space itself vibrate. The harmonic waves spread outward like ripples on a pond, but these ripples could crack planets in half. When the wave hit the nearest bioships, they simply exploded into clouds of organic matter that scattered across the void. Morgthul responded immediately by releasing a swarm of fighter craft from every ship in his fleet. The small living vessels moved like angry wasps as they dove toward the Crystal Armada. Each fighter was the size of a human car but could think and react faster than any pilot. They swarmed around the crystal ships and began boring through their hulls with acid weapons that ate through solid matter. Kixandra waited for exactly 3 seconds before unleashing her own attack. Every energy ship in her fleet focused their power on the nearest star and began to drain its light. The star grew dimmer as its energy was pulled into massive lens arrays that concentrated the stellar fire into beams of pure destruction. When the beams fired, they cut through both enemy fleets like knives through paper. Captain Carter gripped the arms of his command chair as he watched the opening moments of the battle. The destruction was beyond anything humans had ever imagined. Single shots were destroying ships the size of cities. The energy readings on his instruments were so high that Lisa Park had to keep adjusting the sensors to prevent them from burning out. The 3 fleets moved toward each other like colliding galaxies. Crystal ships sang their deadly harmonics, while bioships spawned new fighters from their own wounded flesh. Energy vessels phased in and out of normal space as they fired concentrated starlight at anything that moved. The space between the fleets filled with debris and the dying screams of a million different life forms. Zethkalar's crystal fortress began to glow brighter as he channeled power through its living hull. The ship was 20 kilometers long and covered in crystal spikes that could each destroy a human city. When it sang its battle song, the frequency was so perfect that enemy ships simply fell apart at the molecular level. Hundreds of bioships and energy vessels were reduced to their basic atoms in seconds, but the bioships were already adapting to the crystal harmonics. Morgthul's living vessels began to change their internal structure to resist the deadly vibrations. New fighters spawned from the destroyed ships, and these offspring were immune to the crystal song. They dove at the fortress ship like antibodies attacking a virus and began to eat through its crystal hull. Cassandra saw her opportunity and focused the power of 3 different stars on Zethkalares' flagship. The combined energy beam was hot, enough to ignite gas giant planets, but the crystal ship's hull simply absorbed the energy and used it to sing even louder. The harmonic wave that resulted shattered 2 of Cassandra's lens ships and sent shock waves through her entire fleet. The battle had been raging for 2 hours when Captain Carter realized that all 3 sides were evenly matched. For every ship destroyed, another seemed to take its place. The bioships could regenerate from almost any damage. The crystal ships could reshape themselves into new configurations. The energy ships could simply phase out of normal space when they were in danger. Ben Adams was tracking casualty numbers on his tactical display, but had given up counting individual ships. Entire fleets were being destroyed and reformed in minutes. The bioships were literally eating the wreckage of destroyed vessels and using the materials to build new fighters. The crystal ships were singing in harmony to create resonance patterns that could fold space and time. The energy ships were draining multiple stars simultaneously and using the power to create weapons that existed in 17 dimensions at once. Amy Stone was monitoring alien communications, and what she heard made her face go pale. The 3 warlords were no longer just trying to defeat each other. They were trying to destroy each other's entire species. This was not just a battle for territory or resources. This was a war of extinction where only one race would survive. The turning point came when all 3 warlords brought their flagship vessels into direct combat with each other. Zethkalares' crystal fortress had grown to twice its original size. By absorbing destroyed enemy ships into its hull, Morgthul's Bio-Titan was spawning new fighters even as it was being torn apart by harmonic weapons. Cassandra had merged with the energy output of an entire solar system and appeared as a being of pure light visible from 1,000 light years away. The 3 Titans met in the center of the battlefield as their fleets continued to destroy each other around them. Zethkalares' fortress sang a note that tried to shatter the fabric of reality itself. Morgthul's bioship released every fighter it had ever spawned in a final desperate attack. Cassandra gathered the light of 10 stars and focused it into a beam that could crack the surface of a neutron star. Captain Carter ordered his crew to shield their eyes as the 3 flagship vessels collided in an explosion that created a brief artificial supernova. The light was so bright that it was visible in neighboring star systems. The energy release was so massive that it created gravitational waves that rippled across local space and caused nearby planets to shift in their orbits. When the light finally faded and Carter's crew could see again, there was nothing left where the 3 flagships had been. No debris, no energy signatures, no trace that 3 of the most powerful beings in the galaxy had ever existed. They had destroyed each other so completely that not even atoms remained. The surviving alien fleets drifted in stunned silence. Millions of ships hung motionless in space as their crews tried to understand what had just happened. The 3 warlords who had led them for generations were gone. The flagship vessels that had seemed invincible were nothing but empty space. The war that had consumed their civilizations for over a century had ended not in victory but in mutual destruction. Lisa Park was the first to speak on the Pioneer's Bridge. The energy readings from the explosion were still registering on her instruments even though the source was gone. The 3 warlords had released so much power in their final moments that they had briefly created a tier in space itself without their leaders. The 3 fleets began to break apart. Some ships tried to continue fighting but without coordination. Their attacks were weak and scattered. Others began to retreat toward their home systems. Many simply drifted in space as their crews mourned the death of everything they had believed in. Captain Carter watched the chaos unfold and made a decision that would change the course of galactic history. The aftermath of the battle was worse than the fighting itself. Millions of alien ships drifted through space like leaves scattered by a hurricane. Most had lost their commanding officers in the explosion that killed the 3 warlords. The survivors were mostly young officers who had never expected to lead anything larger than a single vessel. Commander Vesani of the Crystal Fleet was only 200 years old, which made her barely an adult by Vortex standards. She had watched her Crystal Fortress ship sing its final song and now found herself in command of 30,000 vessels with no idea what to do next. Her people had been at war for so long that none of them remembered what peace looked like. Hive. Queen Zelmira was even younger at just 50 cycles of her species' breeding time. She commanded the largest remaining bioship in Morgothal's fleet, but had never given orders to more than a dozen vessels at once. The bioships around her were wounded and confused without the war chief's guiding presence. Some were beginning to attack each other out of pure instinct. Photonic Admiral Luxender was the oldest of the surviving commanders at 500 energy cycles, but he had spent his entire existence following Kixandra's orders. Without her brilliant light to guide them, the energy ships were starting to lose cohesion. Some were already beginning to fade back into pure starlight. The communication channels between the fleets were filled with chaos. Some commanders demanded immediate revenge for their fallen leaders. Others called for a retreat to safer space where they could regroup and plan new attacks. A few suggested trying to contact their home governments, but most of the three empires' leadership had been aboard the flagship vessels when they were destroyed. Captain Carter listened to the alien transmissions through Amy Stone's translation equipment. The languages were different, but the emotions were the same in any species: fear, anger, confusion, and a desperate need for someone to tell them what to do next. These were not evil beings celebrating destruction. They were lost children who had just watched their parents die. The small human ship had somehow survived the massive battle without taking any damage. The alien fleets had been so focused on destroying each other that none of them had paid attention to the tiny vessel watching from the edge of the battlefield. Now Carter realized that the Pioneer might be the only neutral party left in this entire region of space. Lisa Park was monitoring the energy signatures of the damaged alien vessels. Many of them were leaking radiation that would kill their crews within hours if not repaired. The bioships were bleeding organic fluids into space while trying to heal themselves. The crystal ships had stress fractures that were spreading through their hulls. The energy ships were fluctuating between solid and gaseous states as their containment fields failed. Ben Adams estimated that over half of the surviving vessels would be destroyed by their own damage within the next day. The three fleets had hurt each other so badly that they might all die even without continued fighting. Hundreds of different species were about to become extinct, not from enemy weapons, but from their own wounds. That was when Captain Carter made his decision. He stood up from his command chair and walked over to Amy Stone's communication station. The young officer looked up at him with questioning eyes as he reached for the transmission controls. Amy Stone asked if he really wanted to contact the alien fleets. Carter nodded and told her to open a channel on all frequencies. She hesitated for a moment, then activated the most powerful transmitter on their ship. For the first time in over a century, a human voice would speak to the assembled forces of three galactic empires. The response was immediate. Every alien vessel in the scattered fleets detected the new transmission and began to analyze its source. Most were surprised to discover that it came from the tiny ship they had been ignoring throughout the battle. A few commanders recognized the energy signature as belonging to the mysterious human species. They had heard rumors about. Carter's voice cut through the chaos of alien communications like a knife through fog. He spoke slowly and clearly, knowing that Amy Stone's translation equipment would need time to convert his words into dozens of different languages. His tone was calm and steady, without any trace of fear or aggression. Some alien commanders laughed when they realized that such an insignificant species was daring to address them. The human ship was smaller than most of their fighter craft and carried weapons that could barely damage an escape pod. What right did these primitive beings have to speak to the survivors of the galaxy's greatest military forces? But others were curious about these humans they knew almost nothing about. Earth was located in a remote part of the galaxy that none of the three empires had bothered to explore. The few reports they had received described humans as a young species that had only achieved faster than light travel within the last 50 years. A few commanders were so exhausted by the fighting that they were willing to listen to anyone who offered an alternative to more death. Their fleets were broken, their leaders were gone, and their people were dying in the cold of space. Even advice from primitive humans was better than the chaos they were currently experiencing. Captain Carter continued his transmission as alien vessels throughout the battlefield began to focus their attention on his words. He did not speak like a military commander trying to claim territory or a politician making empty promises. Instead, he spoke like someone who had watched too much death and wanted to offer a different path forward. The human captain talked about waste and senseless loss, about potential that had been thrown away in pursuit of victory that meant nothing. He asked questions that none of the alien commanders had ever considered. What had any of them actually gained from a century of warfare? How many of their people had died for battles that solved nothing, Commander? Vexani found herself listening despite her initial anger at the humans' audacity. Her crystal ships had been built to create beautiful harmonic songs but had been turned into weapons of destruction. When was the last time any Vorthok had used their crystal singing for art instead of war? Hive. Queen Zelmyra stopped giving orders to her bioships and focused all her attention on the human transmission. Her people had the ability to grow entire ecosystems from nothing, but they had spent generations breeding only weapons and fighters. What worlds could they have created instead of the ships they had destroyed? Photonic. Admiral Luxender dimmed his energy form as he considered the humans' words. His people could manipulate the very forces that powered stars, but they used that incredible ability only to build bigger weapons. What wonders could they have brought to the galaxy if they had chosen creation over destruction? Carter's voice continued to reach across the void, carrying ideas that none of the alien survivors had ever heard from a military leader. Captain Carter's words continued to flow across the communication channels as alien commanders throughout the scattered fleets found themselves listening to ideas they had never heard before. The human spoke not of conquest or territory, but of the incredible waste he had witnessed in their battle. His voice remained calm and steady even as he described the destruction of entire civilizations. Amy Stone worked frantically at her translation station to convert Carter's words into the dozens of languages spoken by the three fleets. The computer struggled with concepts that had no equivalent in the alien vocabularies. Words like peace and cooperation and mutual benefit had to be explained rather than simply translated, because these civilizations had forgotten such ideas long ago. The human captain acknowledged the long history of grievances between the three factions, but challenged their basic assumption that war was the only possible solution. He spoke of humanity's own violent past and how his species had once fought wars that nearly destroyed their entire planet. Earth had seen conflicts that killed millions and weapons that could turn entire cities into ash, but humans had learned to redirect their competitive nature toward exploration and scientific advancement instead of mutual destruction. They had discovered that the same intelligence that could build weapons could also build ships that traveled between stars. The same determination that fueled warfare could drive them to solve problems that benefited everyone. Lisa Park provided technical data that Mike Collins had calculated during the battle. The resources consumed in just the single day of fighting could have terraformed 100 dead worlds into garden planets. The energy released in the explosion that killed the three warlords could have provided power to entire star systems. For centuries, the mathematics of destruction versus creation began to sink in among the more thoughtful alien commanders. Commander Vexani realized that her crystal ships had used enough harmonic energy to reshape the orbits of planets, but had accomplished nothing except the death of millions of beings. Her people could literally sing new worlds into existence, but instead they had spent their voices on songs of death. Several crystal ship captains began to respond to Carter's transmission. At first their messages were hostile, demanding to know what right humans had to judge conflicts that were older than their entire civilization. The Vorthic Empire had been fighting the bioswarms and energy beings since before Earth had developed agriculture. How could such primitive creatures understand the complexities of their ancient hatreds? but Carter did not respond with anger or defensiveness. Instead, he admitted that humans were indeed young and inexperienced compared to the great galactic empires. However, he suggested that sometimes an outside perspective could see solutions that were invisible to those trapped within old patterns of thinking. The human captain used simple examples that even the most aggressive alien commanders could understand. He described how human children often fought over toys until an adult showed them how to share and play together. The adult did not need to be stronger or smarter than the children, but could see the obvious solution that the fighting children could not. Hive. Queen Zelmyra found herself considering Carter's words despite her initial instinct to dismiss them. Her bioships were designed to adapt and evolve, but they had been locked into patterns of warfare for so long that they had forgotten how to change in other directions. What if they used their incredible biological flexibility to create instead of destroy? Some of the bioship commanders began to transmit their own responses to the human vessel. They described the endless cycle of fighting that had consumed their resources and attention for generations. Every victory led to new enemies, and every defeat required revenge. They had built the most advanced biological technology in the galaxy, but used it only to breed better killers. Carter listened to their responses and offered observations rather than judgments. He pointed out that their bioships could grow and heal and adapt faster than any artificial technology. What if they used these abilities to restore the damaged worlds they had fought over instead of creating new weapons to fight more battles? The energy beings of the Photonic Collective were the most skeptical of Carter's message. Photonic Admiral Luxender transmitted that humans were made of crude matter while his people were pure energy. How could solid beings understand the nature of conflict between energy entities who existed on higher planes of reality? But Carter surprised him by acknowledging the vast differences between their species while pointing out that the results of their conflicts were depressingly similar. Energy beings and solid creatures alike ended up dead when weapons designed by brilliant minds were turned against other brilliant minds. Intelligence was being wasted regardless of what form it took. Kate Rogers had been monitoring the positions of the alien fleets throughout Carter's transmissions. Something remarkable was happening that none of them had expected. Ships that had been preparing to resume fighting were powering down their weapons. Vessels from different factions were moving closer together instead of maintaining defensive distances. For the first time in over a century, bioships and crystal ships were communicating directly with each other without threats or demands for surrender. Energy vessels were sharing technical data with solid matter ships. Commanders who had been trying to kill each other hours ago were now asking questions about the human perspective on cooperation. Amy Stone reported that the communication channels were becoming less chaotic as alien officers began to coordinate their conversations instead of shouting over each other. Some were even working together to translate Carter's concepts into their own languages and philosophical frameworks. The transformation was not universal or immediate. Many alien commanders remained convinced that only total victory could end their conflicts. Some factions attempted to use the temporary ceasefire to position themselves for sneak attacks. A few ships tried to slip away from the main fleets to report back to their home governments, but a growing core of survivors had begun to seriously consider what Carter was offering. They started to ask themselves questions that had been forbidden in their societies for generations. What would peace actually look like? Could former enemies work together toward common goals? Was there really no alternative to eternal warfare? Commander Vexani made the first concrete proposal when she offered to share her fleet's crystal healing technology with damaged bioships that were dying from their wounds. Hive Queen Zelmyra responded by offering to grow replacement parts for crystal vessels that had stress fractures in their hulls. Photonic Admiral Luxender suggested using his energy manipulation abilities to power the repairs. The idea of former enemies helping each other was so revolutionary that many alien commanders initially thought it was some kind of trick or trap. But the ships that accepted the help began to broadcast their experiences to the rest of their fleets. Crystal Song could actually heal bioship wounds faster than natural regeneration. Bio-grown components could strengthen crystal hulls beyond their original specifications. Energy beings could provide power more efficiently than any artificial reactor. Captain Carter watched these developments with amazement and growing hope. The transformation did not happen overnight, but Captain Carter's words had planted seeds in minds that had known only warfare for generations. Over the following days, as the scattered fleets tended to their wounded and salvaged what they could from the battlefield, unprecedented conversations took place between former enemies. Commander Vexani found herself in direct communication with Hive Queen Zelmyra, discussing how crystal harmonics could be used to guide biological growth instead of destroying enemy ships. The Vorthic Crystal Singer had never considered that her people's ability to manipulate matter through sound could be used to help other species create instead of forcing them to die. The bioships were already adapting to work alongside crystal vessels. Zelmyra watched in amazement as her living ships began to grow crystal components that resonated with Vorthic frequencies. The hybrid technology was more powerful than either species had achieved alone, and it was being used to repair damage instead of causing it. Photonic Admiral Luxender discovered that his energy manipulation abilities could guide both crystal growth and biological development in ways that neither solid matter species had imagined possible. When energy beings worked together with physical creatures, they could create technologies that transcended the limitations of matter or energy alone. Captain Carter did not position himself as a new ruler to replace the fallen warlords. Instead, he offered humanity as mediators and guides, sharing Earth's hard-learned lessons about moving from warfare to cooperation. The humans had fought 2 world wars that nearly destroyed their planet before learning that their competitive nature could be channeled toward exploration and scientific achievement. Kate Rogers helped establish neutral zones where alien fleets could meet without fear of attack. The human ship Pioneer became a mobile embassy where representatives from all 3 factions could gather to discuss their common problems. Amy Stone worked around the clock to improve translation systems so that Crystal Singer's bioship commanders and energy beings could communicate more effectively. The process was difficult and sometimes violent. Old hatreds did not disappear simply because a human had suggested a better way. Some factions attempted to exploit the temporary peace to gain strategic advantages. Several skirmishes broke out when suspicious commanders decided that cooperation was just another form of warfare, but the core group of survivors who had listened to Carter's initial message became a growing coalition committed to trying something different. They began to see their former enemies as beings with similar problems rather than obstacles to be destroyed. The bioships needed resources to heal and grow. The crystal ships needed harmonious environments to function properly. The energy beings needed stable sources of power to maintain their existence. Working together, they could provide each other with exactly what they needed. Bioships could grow the organic components that crystal vessels required for self-repair. Crystal Singers could create the harmonic frequencies that guided biological growth in precise directions. Energy beings could provide the power that both solid matter species needed for their advanced technologies. Mike Collins calculated that the combined fleets working together could accomplish more in 1 year than any single faction had achieved. In the previous century of warfare, the bioship's ability to grow and adapt combined with crystal singing technology and energy manipulation could terraform dead worlds, restore damaged ecosystems, and even repair the stellar damage caused by their weapons. The first joint mission was established to help refugee populations that had fled the war zones over the past several decades. Millions of beings from dozens of species were living in makeshift camps on barren moons and dead asteroids. They had been abandoned by their governments and forgotten by the warring factions, who were too busy fighting to care about civilian casualties. Commander Vexani volunteered her crystal ships to provide harmonic healing for radiation sickness and structural damage. Hive Queen Zelmyra offered to grow new habitats and food sources for the displaced populations. Photonic Admiral Luxender agreed to power the massive undertaking and provide energy for life support systems. The results exceeded everyone's expectations. Crystal harmonics could purify poisoned atmospheres in days rather than decades. Bioships could grow entire cities customized for different species' needs. Energy beings could power terraforming equipment that transformed barren rocks into garden worlds. Working together, the three factions accomplished in weeks what would have taken centuries using conventional technology. Word of their success spread throughout the galaxy as refugee populations broadcast their gratitude to anyone who would listen. Worlds that had been written off as permanently damaged were becoming habitable again. Species that had been facing extinction were finding new homes and hope for the future. Other alien civilizations began to take notice of what was happening in the Zarian Nebula. The three most feared military forces in the galaxy were working together to create instead of destroy. Scientists and diplomats from neutral worlds requested permission to observe and learn from this unprecedented cooperation. Captain Carter found himself hosting a constant stream of visitors aboard the Pioneer. Representatives from dozens of species wanted to understand how humans had convinced three warring empires to stop fighting. The answer was simpler than most of them expected, but harder than any of them had imagined. Humans had not used superior weapons or advanced technology to force peace on the alien factions. They had simply offered a different perspective and asked questions that challenged basic assumptions about the nature of conflict. Sometimes the most powerful weapon was an idea whose time had finally come. The formal peace accord was signed 6 months after the battle that killed the three warlords. Representatives from all three factions met aboard a specially grown bioship that incorporated crystal singing chambers and energy manipulation arrays. The hybrid vessel was a symbol of what could be accomplished when different species combined. Their unique abilities, the treaty established the first interspecies cooperative council in galactic history. Instead of empire borders based on military conquest, they created resource-sharing agreements based on mutual benefit. The bioships would provide biological services to any species that needed them. The crystal singers would offer harmonic healing and matter manipulation. The energy beings would share power generation and advanced physics. Knowledge. Captain Carter stood on the observation deck of the hybrid vessel and watched something that had never been seen before in the galaxy. Crystal ships, biovessels, and energy beings were working together on a massive construction project. They were building a memorial station to honor all who had died in the centuries of warfare while also creating a research facility dedicated to finding peaceful solutions to other galactic conflicts. The station would serve as headquarters for the new Cooperative Council and as a training center where other species could learn the techniques of interspecies cooperation. The same intelligences that had designed planet-killing weapons were now focused on technologies that could restore damaged worlds and heal the wounds left by generations of warfare. Lisa Park recorded everything for the historical archives back. On Earth, humanity had achieved something unprecedented in galactic politics, not through military conquest, but through the simple act of offering hope for a better way. The human approach to peace had succeeded where countless weapons had failed. The galaxy watched in amazement as the impossible became reality. Three civilizations that had seemed destined to destroy each other were instead working together to build a future based on cooperation rather than conquest. And it had all started with a single human voice speaking words of peace into the darkness of war.